such as this one taken from an ad by me. Of course, it's not exactly figured that this camera really exists, but this is the picture 1616 camera, one of the more recent CCD cameras. CCD camera, as most of you know, records an image by detecting individual photons on an array, silicon chip array, and it's a very efficient detector of photons. It lets you get images like this of quite good detailed images in very short exposure times. This is an image by Jack Newton, taken from the same need ad. It's an image of NGC 4565. The major limitation of a CCD camera is shown in this sheet of specifications in this advertisement. And that is, there is no pointers. If you look at the second line, it gives you the size in millimeters of the chip for these various cameras. So SME has a whole series of different cameras. And they range, as you can see, from 3 millimeters to 7 millimeters to 14 millimeters across. Now, when you think about that, say 7 millimeters, the medium column there, the middle column, it's about the size of a thumbnail. And you think about film, 35 millimeter film is 24 by 36 millimeters. It's quite a bit bigger. So obviously a CCD camera is only going to record a very small image. It'll record that small image very well. There's no question of that. It will, again, record that image in a very short exposure time because it's so efficient at detecting photons compared to film. But it certainly is not the answer for photography if you want to do wide field photography. I don't know if you can see the bottom row, but this is another thing to keep in mind when assessing CCD cameras, and that is their price. So these are prices in US dollars. And you'll see that even to get a relatively small 7 millimeter chip, you pay $2,500 US, and to get a reasonable size CCD chip, you pay $7,000 US. Now these prices, of course, they'll come down. The larger chips are just hitting the market now, and of course, things will get cheaper within a few years. Another thing to look at, I'll actually go back to the previous slide and show you this, and that is the fourth row, which gives the size of the pixel in microns. So 10 microns, 9 microns, 9 microns. So that's effectively the resolution of the chip, about 10 microns. So that's what a CCD camera does. It gives you about 10 micron resolution and perhaps 1,000 pixels across. Well, here's my CCD camera. It consists of a aluminum cube, about 3 inches in diameter, and a Tupperware box. The Tupperware box is simply meant to keep the innards light tight, which I'll show you in a second. The inside of the tube is lined with the high-tech anti-reflective material Velcro. It works pretty well. It prevents light from bouncing around too much. So this is the front of the camera. It plugs into attaches to the focuser. of the telescope. This is the Am I talking loud enough so you can hear me in the back?
What?
Let me know if I'm not talking loud enough and I'll speak up. Is that okay?
There, it's working.
Should I talk that loud to the mic?
Yeah.
Okay, how's that? All right, so this is the inside of the camera. The camera consists of this plate, this aluminum plate with holes in it to attach it to the tube. You'll see that the camera takes medium format film. It takes film in chip size. The film on the right is a medium format chip, and the film on the left is a 35 millimeter frame. Now keep in mind the sizes. So the CC camera, one that's quasi-affordable, is about 7 millimeters across. The medium format chip you see is 60 millimeters, and the 35 millimeter frame is 45 millimeters. One thing that I had to deal with in designing this camera is field curvature. When you're photographing over an image surface this large, about 3 inches across, you have a considerable problem with the focal surface not being a plane. So the light from the telescope lens is not focusing on a flat surface, but rather on a section of a sphere. And so I had to design the backing plate to compensate for this. And the way I designed it is rather hokey, but it seems to work. And that is simply to cut out concentric layers of Scotch tape. Scotch tape is 2/1000ths of an inch thick, and if you can calculate where you need to position the various layers of the tape to get the right surface. And that's how I've done it. I haven't had access. I've been trying to bug various friends in Vancouver to lay this up for me, but no one has volunteered yet.
You got the ball.
Pardon me?
You got the ball in Victoria.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind. So you can see the amount of curvature here. It's about 1 millimeter over the surface. And this is the loaded film. The film I use is a home hyper technical pan film, the black and white film, which has wonderful properties for astrophotography. It has a very fine grain. I mentioned, for example, earlier that a CC camera, the CC chip might have a 10 micron pixel size. The grain and resolution capability of the technical pan is about 3 microns. And of course, the main advantage is that you can do very big fields using this camera. The telescope I use is a 5-inch f6 refractor. It's got a nice big focuser so it can illuminate fully this 3-inch diameter. Anyway, I don't really want to talk too much about the camera and telescope. It's the point of the talk is how you use the computer. So I'll explain to you now how you use the computer. Well, you have your negatives. You make prints from your negatives. I usually make 8x10 prints, and then it's possible to convert these prints, this photograph, to a digital form. The way this is done, well, there are a couple of ways. This is the way I do it. It's by using a flatbed scanner. This is quite a good flatbed scanner. It's 600 dpi optical resolution and 12-bit color depth. Most scanners you'll find will be 300 or 400 dpi optical resolution and maybe 8-bit color depth. It really does make a difference if you go to the higher quality scanner. So you just put the print down on the bed of the scanner, and it'll read the image. It'll sample the image. It'll basically treat the image as if it were an array, just like a CCD array, except it happens to be a much bigger array. This is an 8x10 print. I like to scan my prints at 600 dpi. Well, do the arithmetic. If you have 8 inches at 600 dots per inch, then that's about 5,000 pixels. And the other dimension, 10 inches, becomes about 6,000 pixels. So the image, as it gets converted to digital form, will be about 5,000 by 6,000 pixels, or about 30 million pixels. As compared with perhaps a million pixels for a high-resolution CCD camera. Obviously, there's a lot more data to process here, and you need a fairly high-end computer system. This is like a Pentium 90 system with 120 megabytes of RAM in it. The people at the computer store often think I'm talking about hard drive space when I come in and ask if I talk about that sort of memory. But you need it. Now, I don't want to frighten you, but part of the point of this talk is that I think more people should be doing this. You don't need 128 megabytes of RAM unless you do medium format astro-photography. I mean, I've got such incredibly big images because I've got such incredibly big film. And if I were using 35 millimeter film, then the image size would come down by at least a factor of 3 or 4. So keep that in mind. By the way, you don't really need a scanner. I said there's another way to get your images to digital form, and that is to go to a Photoshop and take advantage of their Kodak CD-ROM service. Bring in your negatives, they'll scan them in, convert them to put them on CD-ROM. You can take them home to your computer and play with it. So when you put your image on the scanner, you can you get a window popping up like this on your favorite program, which drives the scanner, lets you set the resolution at which you're going to scan the image. As I mentioned, I usually scan the images at 600 dpi. You probably can't read these figures, but 600 dpi. And another figure you probably can't read is the size of the image. So down here it says 26,576 kilobytes, so almost 30 megabytes for one image. So I think now I'll turn all the lights off if you don't mind. Did I unplug this one? So I'd like to just show you a few images. So these are all just scanned into the computer and then brought up on the screen. So this is. So keep in mind these are all taken with my medium format camera. So this is the North America and Pelican nebulae. A 2.5-hour exposure on gas hypered technical pan film with a very dark red filter, hydrogen alpha, H alpha filter. Again, the computer screen is only 1,000 pixels across, and this is a 5,000 pixel image, so obviously you're shrinking it down quite a bit to get it on the screen. So really to see everything that's in the image, you have to magnify portions of the image. So this is a magnified view of the Pelican nebula. And the magnified, yes, still. I think even at this magnification, it's reasonably pleasing. This is very tiny portion of the original image. And it, again, you really do need to blow things up to this level to see all the detail when you've got images that are 5,000 pixels across. This is the Veil Nebula, 2.5 hour exposure with a red filter. What's interesting about this, I think it's a little difficult to make out, but I hope you can spot it, is the inside-outside star density differential. If you look, for example, to the right of the bright star there are fewer stars than to the left, and that's because of the shock wave effect from the supernova explosion. Again, just zooming in on parts of the image. These slides are all taken by photographing the computer screen. If you do photograph the computer screen, you have to keep in mind that the contrast should be set fairly low. Contrast on the screen. Most computer screens set at high contrast will just, and then photograph will just not give you the full dynamic range of the image. So set the contrast fairly low and experiment with different exposure times. This is, these are all about 3 degrees across. This is Virgo cluster, many galaxies in this cluster. Right at the bottom center is M87. And you can see some finer detail if you zoom in. That's M84 and M86, the brighter ones in this close-up, and various other assorted galaxies. Another tiny one off in the corner. I forgot which one is this. M31. Again, with a 3 degree wide field, you can really grain large objects nicely. Finer detail on portions of the image and the companion. This is the, when you get back home and turn your RSC calendar to July, this is the image you'll see, the image of the lagoon in Tripit. Again, with a wide field, you can see much, obviously greater size. The fainter nebulosity off to the left there from the lagoon, for example. And some finer detail. This was taken, by the way, with a red filter. Much of my photography is red filter photography. Even with red filter, you'll see that the reflection nebulosity, the blue reflection nebulosity to the north of the emission nebulosity does go up. And here's a detail on that painter nebulosity to the left of the lagoon. This is the M22 and M28. There's an airplane going right through the middle of the piece there. And close up on one of the oculars. So dark nebulosity, no Peuthas. Interesting shapes there. It's sort of like an ink blot test shape you can see. I see on the left there, I see a sort of a beak in a bird or something. NGC 7822, again in this year's RSC calendar. 3.5 hour exposure with a hydrogen alpha filter. The exposures are all manually guided, by the way. A lot of fun. We'll try it sometime. 3.5 hours manual guiding. I don't even have a declination motor. I just do my declination directions manually with the knob. So, yeah, this is not a very commonly seen object. Any takers? Any guesses? No? No? Keep in mind it's 3 degrees across.
It's not the rosette.
No? Can't leave till you tell me what it is.
We have that.
This is IC 1396. It's not very commonly seen because it's a very faint emission nebulae, very large emission nebula in Cepheus. 2 3/4 hour exposure with a deep red filter.
It has no nickname.
I don't think so. I believe some people at the Edmonton Center were studying this object a couple of years ago. I don't know if they have a nickname for it. So here's some zooming in on portions of the image. This dark nodule right slightly to the right of the center is VDB 142. Really interesting structure. Here it's really blown up. Probably a bit too much, but go back to that. By the way, if you want to actually make, oh great. Yeah. If you want to actually make prints of your images that you have on the computer, you can do this. You can photograph the screen, but the problem is you've only got about 1,000 pixels across. And if you're showing slides to people who are far enough away, then it doesn't matter. But if you actually want to make a good quality print, it does. 1,000 pixels is still nearly enough. So what you can do is you can take your image in digital form on a tape or a portable hard drive to a service bureau, and they'll output it for you on what's called a film recorder. It's about $25 a pop, but it works, and it gets about 4,000 lines of resolution. So that's really the way to after you brought your images in, just to get an output. Anyway, back to VB142. This is the image on the right. The image on the left is mine. The image on the right is a really nice image by Paul Boltwood of the same object. But it just gives you an idea of the image scale, CCD versus film. Keep in mind that this is a very tiny portion of my original photograph. Now, I'm not saying one is better than the other. They both have their advantages. Paul's image shows fainter stars, and it doesn't have the amount of noise that my image does, blown up to this image scale. It's also a very long exposure, several hours of exposure, and longer focal length. I think about 4 times the focal length I was using. So, but the point is that both of these media have their advantages, and there's much you can do with either one of them. Here I just darkened my image a bit to bring it more in line with Paul's image. So this is all very fine and dandy. You scan in your images and you drop them up on your screen, zoom in and magnify them. It really is nice to be able to inspect your images on the screen. But is that really what this is all about? Well, the whole point of digital imaging is to be able to manipulate your images, not just to scan them in and put them on your screen, but to actually adjust them in certain ways. And to understand how you adjust them, you have to understand that a digital image is simply a series of numbers. In the center of this slide, there's a crosshair, and I don't know, I hope these numbers are big enough you can read. There's the little info window there, which has R, G, and B. Well, that tells you the red, green, and blue pixel values of red, green, and blue values of that particular pixel centered at that crosshair. So R is 246, red is 246, green is 189, and blue is 90. Well, that's reasonable because that's a yellow pixel, and you would expect it to be greater in red and green than in blue. Now, if you do the same thing to a black and white image, you'll just get one number. These numbers are, because it's 8 bits, it'll read a number between 0 and 255. And that's all an image is, it's a bunch of numbers. Now, if it's just a bunch of numbers, you can do all sorts of things to it. You can adjust it in whatever way you want. By the way, that's slightly out of focus photograph of my fiance. She was the one responsible for the Velcro idea on the camera. She also knows some trying with that. Just learning lots of stuff. So one thing you can do with these images is you can fix flaws. You can, for example, there's a scratch in this image. This is a portion of the image of the lagoon in Pripyat, and there's a scratch sort of running through the top, and there's this small paintbrush. You take this paintbrush and just run along the scratch and you eliminate it. It takes about 20 seconds. I've eliminated scratches on my prints just by using dye. And believe me, it takes a lot longer than 20 seconds. It takes 20 minutes to do a good job of touching up the print, at least for me, using traditional techniques. So having the computer to manipulate the images really does help. Okay, it's a bit too dark to see what I wanted you to see here, so I don't know. I don't know if any of you can see it. There's a band, a tiny white band going through just above where that crosshair is, a horizontal band. Yeah, it's there. I can barely see it from here. Anyway, you can select areas of your photograph that have these flaws. This band, by the way, is an artifact of the scanner, and so you can eliminate these flaws, whatever other flaws, by just selecting the area, applying a brightness adjustment to that area, and then that flaw is eliminated. Take my word for it. It was eliminated. Yeah. Another thing you can do with the digital techniques is adjust the overall contrast and brightness of your images. Here I have two scans of two different prints of the same negative. The one on the right is a high contrast print, and the one on the left is a low contrast print of the same negative. The trouble with the one on the right, it shows the nebulosity, makes nebulosity very well, and the stars, but it's lost the highlight detail in the lagoon nebula. The one on the left, the low contrast print shows the highlight detail, the bright areas of the lagoon, but not much else. And this is a histogram. It just tells you how many pixels have various values for the image on the left, I believe. You see they're mostly, the pixel values are mostly to the left. It's low pixel values because it's mostly black image. So what you can do to the image on the left is you can apply this curves adjustment. Now I'm using Adobe Photoshop here, so any program you use will have something like this, whereby you can take a certain input pixel value and transform it to another output pixel value. So just by jacking up the darker pixel values a bit, so bringing up these pixels in that range, you can bring out the shadow detail a bit better, but you don't make this portion of the curve completely flat. You still have some highlight detail there. And so it's a way to extract the maximum out of your images by scanning them in a different contrast and then manipulating them in whatever way you like. Another thing you can do is you can scan in photographs different negatives of the same object. So unlike the previous pair of shots, these are different negatives. The one on the left is a hydrogen alpha shot, a red shot, and the one on the right is a photograph taken through a yellow filter. Now again, you can adjust. So let's just go back here and understand the differences between these two exposures. Roughly the same stars show, and roughly the same intensities of the stars are present. But the one on the right shows the nebulosity much more faintly, and that's simply because it is red nebulosity. If you photograph it with a red filter with suitably adjusted exposure time, you'll record much more density for the nebulosity than you would with a yellow filter. But you can take your picture shot, taken with the yellow filter, and apply some sort of adjustment to it. So apply a brightness contrast adjustment, and you make it look comparable to the one taken with the red filter. How much more time should I take, by the way? Another 5 minutes here, okay. You can also do these fancy curve adjustments to the images. And it seems like a way of avoiding, instead of doing a 3-hour exposure, you get away with a 1-hour exposure. But if you look carefully at the images, you'll see that really the original 3-hour exposure is better, because the noise just gets, whenever you do this sort of manipulation, the noise in the image also increases. So the one on the right, the adjusted exposure is much more noisy than the one on the left. Another thing you can do is you can align your images. If you have 2 different images of the same object, then by carefully rotating and stretching the images, you can try to get them aligned and then plot them in such a manner that they're registered. The same stars correspond to the same locations on the 2 different images. Unfortunately, this is a little bit difficult to do for me because of the type of film I use, the medium format film, and there's some elasticity in the film and so on. So it's not possible to achieve perfect registration while I'm working on it. What you can do once you've registered your 2 images is you can just combine them. That's a way of reducing noise. If you add together several images, you can reduce the noise. I don't have an example of that. But another thing you can do is you can keep in mind that one of these represents red light, one of these represents yellow light. These are black and white images. So you have some color information there. So you can take this color information and trace a color image. This is following the tradition of David Malin and various other tricolor astrophotographers, where you take black and white images which have advantages of the black and white film, with high resolution and fine detail, and by again just photographing the same object with different filters, you get other colors. So this is the sort of result you can get. Now, if you look very carefully at the images, you'll see that the stars aren't perfectly registered. I don't know if you can tell on this scale, zoom in a bit on portions of it, and you can start to see the misregistration. Even though it's a color image normally get 3 exposures, red, green, and blue. This is again disabled with 2 different filters, a red and a yellow filter. There's enough color information in those 2 exposures to extract a reasonable color rendition. Just for comparison purposes, I've got side by side an older photograph of the same object taken with color film, a fast grading color film on a 3200. You can certainly see the difference between the 2. So this is what I'm working on now, and I was hoping to have more examples of tricolor imaging, but maybe next year at the GA I'll have a few more examples for you. The point is not what I do in particular. The point is that this medium, this combination of the film and the computer can give you some nice results. And if you're contemplating photographing with a CCD camera, I'd like you all to keep in mind that film is not passe. It still has its uses, and especially when you bring the computer into the picture, there's some really nifty things you can do. Thank you.
I just want to clarify, those were all taken with what instrument?
a 5-inch f6 refractor. It's an astrophysics refractor. Astrophysics is very embarrassed. Is now very embarrassed with this refractor because it has very poor blue color correction. But I get around that by using yellow filters. And even though it has poor blue, it still extracts color information from it. Peter.
Where do you get your lack of registration color images?
It has to do with the fact that my images are so large, 5,000 pixels across. The lack of registration is only on the order of about 5 pixels in the corners. And again, this is something I've just been working on the last couple of weeks. There are two sources. One is the film is elastic. This is a 3-inch wide chip of film which I'm loading. I try to load it in a very consistent manner. But each time you load the film, you're going to stretch it in a slightly different way. And the other source of misregistration is the lens distortion. See, if you don't have the two frames centered exactly the same, then the lens is going to distort the image in a slightly different manner. So what I'm trying to do now is line up the images exactly. So I guide on a star that's right in the middle of the frame, so that I have exactly the same positioning. And B, I'm altering my film loading technique to try to get consistency in the way the film is loaded. The film is loaded just basically by taking a chip out of my film pouch and placing it on the surface of the adhesive. I didn't mention that, but it's a two-sided adhesive. And just placing it there and then brushing it lightly to force it onto the adhesive. I'm trying to become more consistent in doing that. I don't know if I'll be successful. I think it'll be necessary to write a little computer program to stretch one image to match the other.
That could be in the actual telescope lens itself.
Yeah, there are all sorts of aberrations there, especially when you deal with 3-inch wide negatives. You're going to notice the aberrations. Thank you.